Hello again. This is the third video in the series where I'll be covering how to install applications. So in this video, I'll cover the different types of packages that I generally use. I will not be covering snap packages. I'll be covering the main one, which is RPM, Flatpak, and AppImages. If you had asked me maybe 7 years ago how easy it would be to install an application, I would say, yeah, it's easier compared to Mac OS or Windows when I would just simply use Synaptic on Ubuntu. But now with the introduction of Snaps, Flatpak, AppImages, there are a lot of combinations. If I were to show you all the different ways of installing an application, I can create maybe a Ken Burns type documentary, but instead I've chosen to structure this video in such a way that I show you how to install and uninstall these particular packages, either using a graphical user interface or the command line interface to get the best results and hopefully the easiest results. I'll not be covering the differences of these packages in detail, but I'll mention why I choose a particular package over the other and my choice of using one interface over the other to manage these packages. So with that being said, let's start off with the first type of package, which is the RPM package. It's a default software packaging used by openSUSE. Fedora uses this packaging system as well. The two major ones that are generally available are Debian and these RPM packages. So Deb and RPM packages. First, we'll be covering the official RPM packages available in the main repository and also the non-free one which is used for the Nvidia drivers installation. I would recommend using this packaging system because it works well with the openSUSE Tumbleweed operating system, and these are tested before they're packaged and distributed in the openSUSE Tumbleweed repo. So let's start off with the RPM installation. Now to install the RPM, I would recommend using Myrlyn, which is the graphical user interface or the package manager currently available on Tumbleweed. It's the replacement for Yast. It is one of the reasons I actually switched to openSUSE because it was a perfect alternative to Synaptic on Ubuntu. Fedora had something called, I think, Dragora DNF, which failed miserably every time I tried to use it. So I'll be covering how to install applications now using Myrlyn. To access Myrlyn, click the Meta key or the Windows key. To access the application launcher, click on System, scroll until you see Myrlyn. I'm using Myrlyn read-only in this video. I've set it up in such a way that it can replace Myrlyn. However, I would recommend you use Myrlyn because you will not be able to install or uninstall any apps if you use the read-only version. When you click on Myrlyn, enter your password, wait for the initialization to complete, and then you will see the application. I will not be covering all the tabs. I'll just show you the pertinent ones for installation and some basic functions. I will be covering tabs such as search, repositories, a little bit about patterns, which you've already seen in the installation video, and then finally the package classification. Now to search and install apps, go to the search tab. You will see a small search box there. Before you do use it though, please make sure that the search mode is changed to contains because the auto mode generally doesn't give the best results, which I will show in a bit. Ensure that search in has name, summary, and description all checked. You can check the other boxes as well, but these three should be sufficient for any searches. In the search box, you can enter either the partial name of the application or the full name and click on search. You should be able to see the results in the window to the right. In this example, I'm going to install the Cherry Tree Notebook application. And as you can see, even with the partial name, it's able to give you results. Now I'll show you an example where using the auto mode, I'll show you how we get substantially different results. So here I'm going to just type in subtitle and search for it. I want to find applications like Gopal, Subtitle Editor, and Subtitle Composer. Now if I change it to auto and run the search again, you'll see quite a few of those options are missing. So my preference is always to use the contains search mode to get more wider and more relevant search results. Back to the Cherry Tree notebook installation. So if you search for Cherry Tree, this time I'm going with the full application name. You can see the package name listed there with a brief summary. The version number is also available and also the size of the package. At the bottom of the screen, you have different tabs showing you different kind of information like a brief description of the application, some technical data which also includes the application website. It shows you dependencies. Usually applications in Linux depend on other packages to perform properly. So the dependency list shows you possibly other packages that need to be installed alongside this. You get to see versions, basically from which repository you're going to download the package from. File list and changelog you'll not be able to see if you do not install it, so we'll come back to it once we install this application. To install the application itself, click on the checkbox. You can either right click and select install, or clicking on the checkbox itself should mark it for installation. Once you see the plus sign there, you can go ahead and click accept to install the application. If there are any dependent packages which need to be installed, you'll get to see that list over there. Click continue. It should download all the packages, install it, and run any post-installation scripts. If you're done installing applications, you can click finish to exit. In this case, let's hit back and go back and look at the file list and the changelog. You'll get to see detailed notes attached with this package during the time of the update. And the file list tells you all the different files within this particular application that were installed on your system. Now I'll show you how to uninstall an RPM package using Myrlyn itself. The reason I use Myrlyn is because it's easier to search compared to Zypper. So you can just search for any package that you want to uninstall. Similar to how you install the application, you can either right click and click delete, or you can click on the checkbox to cycle through keep, update, or delete. Once you see the minus sign there, you can click accept to uninstall it. Once it completes the action, you'll get to see the package name that was removed. Now, a good practice is to go back rather than click finish. Go to the package classification tab, click on unneeded packages because any dependencies that were installed with it also need to be uninstalled. So unless these dependent packages are being used by any other application, you won't see it there. Otherwise, you'll see the list of packages that also need to be deleted or uninstalled. You can click the minus key on your keyboard to quickly mark them for removal. Click accept. Again, you have to go back. It does not cycle through all dependent packages. There are some packages dependent on the dependent packages, so you'll have to go back. Make sure that the list is clear before you can click on accept and finish. You'll have to repeat these steps until all those packages are cleared. Another quirk is that you have to click on another option and then click on unneeded packages again because it does not auto refresh. Now I'll walk you through RPM lock in Tumbleweed. Because it's a rolling release, there are some default packages which get automatically flagged to get installed. So in the earlier video where we installed openSUSE Tumbleweed, I showed you how you can exclude certain packages from being installed. However, when you run the updates from the command line interface, these packages get reinstalled because they're part of the default packages in Tumbleweed. So to avoid them being installed, we can use the lock or the taboo function. You can right click on the package that you want to lock and click on taboo. In this example, I've already locked the VLC application because I use a different media player. I can either install it or remove the lock so that it can get installed during the next update. You can just click on the checkbox to cycle through those options, or you can right click and select any option. Like installing and uninstalling, click accept to make the changes stick. Now moving on to updating the RPM packages. While you can use Myrlyn to update it, the best option available is to use the command line interface or console using Zypper to update the packages. This will avoid any issues during the update process. To access the console, you can click the Meta key or the Windows key and click on console, or click Ctrl Alt T as in Tango to open the terminal or console or the command line interface. We will be using the Zypper command to update it. So what you're seeing on the screen is sudo zypper cc, which is essentially cleaning the repositories, then sudo zypper ref to refresh the repository, and finally sudo zypper dup, which is distribution upgrade. Always use dup, as using up, which is standard for upgrade, causes issues on Tumbleweed. That command is used on openSUSE Leap. When you hit enter, it runs sequentially, where it cleans the repositories, refreshes it, and then provides a list of all the updates. It'll clearly show you what the current version is and what it's going to be upgraded to. If you see PM listed there in the version name, it means it's a Pacman repository file. You can type in yes to continue. It'll download all the packages and go ahead and install them. It's a good practice to restart your computer after an update, even if you're not prompted to do so. For proprietary packages like Nvidia, you will have to accept the terms and conditions before you continue with the update. Talking about Nvidia, this is just a small note. If you have an Nvidia graphics card, and if there's a kernel update, in this case there's a major kernel update from 7.0 to 7.1, as you can see here. Since I use the open source driver provided by the openSUSE community, I just make sure that if there's an update for a kernel, the update for the open driver is also available. This basically ensures that the compatibility is set before we install the kernel. If it's not there, there are chances that the driver does not get loaded and the graphics card will not work as intended. During the update process, when you see the Nvidia Open Driver version changes, you'll notice the first part of it is the firmware version and the second part of it is the kernel number from which kernel is changing in case there is a new kernel installed. As you can see, it's moving from 7.0.12 to 7.1.2. That 7.1.2 has to correspond with the new kernel that's being installed. If it doesn't, please type no and wait for the latest version to be available. Now I'll be walking through adding an experimental repo, a little bit of background. The openSUSE factory repo is the main development code base that feeds into the snapshots. However, these packages are sort of staged in specialized sub-projects, and these are maintained by different teams and so on, which are considered experimental in nature. Having said that, these packages, while they may make it to the factory, there are some applications which do not. As an example, Signal Messenger has not been maintained for 2 or 3 months. It does not have an official RPM package on the openSUSE repos. So I've switched over to AppImage for that. So definitely wouldn't recommend installing that. But there are packages like LibreOffice where you have the factory repo, where those apps are developed and you get maybe a newer version before it actually hits the factory. I would not recommend using experimental and especially community packages because they might be buggy, and in maybe rare circumstances they quite possibly could be malicious packages as well. So while I've been rambling, as you can see on the screen, you can find experimental packages on the openSUSE software site. You can search for a particular package, click on the links, and you'll be able to see the build service, and you can see which package they are actually connected to and so on. Now here I only filtered on the experimental ones. You can clearly see them tagged. There are community packages as well, as I mentioned. As you can see, some of them are outdated. Some of them, while they may appear to be up to date, I don't know if they will actually run well or not. So I would not recommend using this. So if you do decide to go ahead and add an experimental repo, click on the expert download button, select the operating system that you want. Now the openSUSE build service packages applications not just in the RPM format but also in the Debian format. So in some cases you will see more options to select an operating system. Make sure you select openSUSE and only look for the section which says openSUSE Tumbleweed. You will see sections for PowerPC, ARM, and so on. Those are for different architectures. What we are looking for is just openSUSE Tumbleweed. Once you copy the hyperlink for that specific section, open console, the command line interface, type in sudo zypper ar, which is basically add repository, and then we'll use the flags Charlie, Frank, Golf, CFG, which is basically check, refresh, and enable the GPG check. It'll essentially check the signing key. Paste the link that we copied. Now, the standard practice is you can actually add the alias after the link, but it's been really buggy on both Zypper as well as Myrlyn, where if you refresh after adding a repo, it says that it cannot determine what kind of packaging system it is. So I would recommend not adding the alias. So as you can see, once you hit enter, it adds the repo. The next thing you would do is do a zypper ref, which is refreshing the repo. Now, even though we did not explicitly give an alias, after adding the repo, it actually added an alias. So you can do a zypper refresh specifically for that particular repo, but I'm just going to use zypper ref for all the repos. Once you hit enter, as it refreshes, it should pick up the new added repo and then prompt you to either trust, reject, or temporarily trust the GPG signing key. I usually hit A and enter for packages that I trust. And once you refresh it, now you can go back to Myrlyn to install apps. In this particular example, I already have LibreOffice installed, so I'm going to show you how to switch vendors. But if it wasn't installed and you're installing it for the first time, you can follow the same steps that we just earlier saw. So now, because I did not add an alias, I'll just quickly show you how to change the name. To do that, click on Extras, Configure Repositories, select the newly added repo, click Edit, and replace the name with whichever name you want to. In this case, I'm going to use LibreTest. Hit OK, and when you hit Close, it'll prompt you to restart the application. So to add more context to what I mentioned earlier, if I try to add a repository without an alias name in Myrlyn, it would keep crashing. So it is easier to add the repository in Zypper and then rename it in Myrlyn. So coming back to the function of changing the vendor for many packages at the same time, click on repositories and then click on the newly added repository. Now, unlike the earlier video where I showed you how to switch from the main repository to Pacman, where I selected only one file and changed the vendor, here, while you're in the newly added repository, if you click on Switch System Packages, it will flag all of them to move from the main repo over to this repo. You can do the same thing and vice versa. where you go to main repo and click on switch system packages, and it'll move packages from other repos over to the main repo. As you've seen all along, the way to make the changes apply is to click on accept and follow the steps from there. To delete a repository, again follow similar process steps where you click on extras, configure repositories, select the repo you want to delete, and then click on delete. Please make sure you do not delete existing ones. You can add them later, but it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. So this is basically a public service announcement to be careful while uninstalling packages. In Linux, you can uninstall even system packages and render your system useless. In this example, I'm showing you that I'm trying to just uninstall a bunch of fonts, but that package is actually linked to several system packages. So when you see something like Plasma 6 Desktop, Plasma 6 Session, and so on, that's basically uninstalling your desktop environment. So be very careful when you see something like this. Just click on keep and hit OK. Try again. You'll notice that the changes don't stick, and you can go ahead and click cancel or accept to exit out of the application. So far I've covered all the official RPM packages. Now there is something called a third-party RPM. Essentially, it's something that's not available on the experimental repos or in the main repo. It's something that you'll get from a developer's website. In this case, I'm using Proton Authenticator as an example, where you get, Debian and RPM files on their site. RPM is obviously the package supported by Tumbleweed. So over here, I'm quickly showing you how to download the file. That's generally the case. You either download it from some place like GitHub or on the developer site itself. The main thing is when you download such files, please do a checksum to verify the authenticity, I guess, of the file, so that the file is either not damaged during download or you're actually downloading the file published by the developer. Here I'm using the commands provided by the Proton team. I will be covering how to use the SHA-256 sum later on in this video in the AppImages section. For now, if you're using this application, you can use the instructions provided on their website. So once you've authenticated the downloaded package, my recommended approach is to use Zypper in to install the third-party application, mainly because Myrlyn is a relatively new application replacing Yast and it doesn't have that capability. Discover does, but I've used Zypper in on a few packages where it automatically checks and installs any dependent packages as well. So in this example, as you can see, I've used the flag allow unsigned RPM. Basically, we have done the SHA 512 sum check. So I think that's enough to validate it. So this will prevent further questions while installing it. Once it runs the command, you see it identifies it as an RPM package and then tries to resolve any package dependencies. Similar to the distribution upgrade process zippered up, type in yes to continue so that it can finish installing the package. Once installed, you can click on the system launcher and then check if the application is installed. If you want to see a list of all the third-party RPM packages you installed, you can use Myrlyn in the package classification tab, and under the orphaned packages, you'll see a list of all these RPM files. So they are considered orphaned because they're not from the repos. From here, you can delete the app if you want to. You cannot update the app because, again, not to sound redundant, but there is no repo that it can actually get the latest version from. So if you have to update it, you have to download the latest version from the site and install it the same way I showed you in the earlier steps. So now moving on to Flatpaks. Flatpaks and Snap packages are quite popular these days because of the convenience it offers. So as you saw a few minutes back, Debian packages run on Ubuntu, Debian, RPM runs on Red Hat and openSUSE Tumbleweed. Flatpak and Snaps, they eliminate that issue. They are flavor agnostic, so you can install it on any Linux flavor and it works right out of the box. Neither of these packaging types are my favorite. I'll not be covering Snap, but with Flatpak, the issue is the amount of space required to install Flatpaks. The other reason why it's not my favorite is because of the sandboxing. There are issues while using web extensions with Firefox and password managers. However, in some cases, certain apps are only available in Flatpak, and it is one of the easier packages to manage for beginners. My recommended approach to manage Flatpaks is using Discover, which is the package manager from KDE. It gives you a simple interface to search FlatHub, where Flatpaks are housed, and you can easily install and uninstall applications from there. You can use the search bar to search for any application, and in the latest version of Discover, the way to identify a Flatpak is to check for the FlatHub badge to the bottom right of the application icon. The other way you can is to click on the application link and go to the page where it shows you all the details. On the top right hand corner, you will see whether it's prompting you to install from FlatHub, and if you click on the drop down, it gives you the option of openSUSE Tumbleweed, which is the RPM packaging system. On this screen, you should be able to see the description of the application. There's a section for reviews, which you do not get in Myrlyn. You also get to see external links and permissions for the Flatpak. If you want to edit the permissions, you can get that in system settings, which I'll show you later on. So if you want to install the app, you can just go ahead and click on the install button, enter the password when prompted, and wait for it to download and install. If this is the first Flatpak that you're installing and if it requires drivers and so on, it will download those packages as well. So even though it says it's 133 MB, it will download driver packages. So in the case of Nvidia, it will download the entire package again. So you have a separate Nvidia driver for your system and a separate one for Flatpak. Once installed, you can launch the application from Discover itself, or you can use the system launcher and launch it from there. Now in this example, you may have noticed the add-ons button that is there. So in Flatpaks, the add-ons don't come bundled along with the application. As mentioned earlier, because of sandboxing, these add-ons will have to be installed as Flatpaks. These are applicable only for certain applications like VLC, maybe GIMP, which require add-ons for additional tasks. If you'd like to see a complete list of Flatpaks installed, my recommended approach is to use Zypper. So you can open a command line interface and simply type in Flatpak space list. You'll get the full list of Flatpaks there. In that way, you can see the packages that are installed along with the dependent packages as well. Now coming to editing permissions for a Flatpak. So once you install it, you get that option available in Discover. Or you can also use the system settings where you can go to application permissions, again application permissions, select the application, and if that application is a Flatpak, you'll have that additional option visible there which says manage Flatpak settings. Disclaimer here, please don't update these settings until and unless you know what you're doing. I'm intentionally leaving out any use cases here. Please refer to the application documentation before you make any updates here. Now, to uninstall a Flatpak, it's relatively easy. You can either just click the delete button from within the application page. In this case, I'm showing you if you had to come back in to discover and search for the application, then you can just click the delete button next to the application name, enter the password when prompted, and uninstall it. Now, in certain cases, you'll also see a delete settings and clear data button before the application description. Click on that if you want to completely wipe out all data for that particular application. A quick note, you cannot run Discover, Myrlyn, or Zypper simultaneously. You will get an error message. In this case, I'm showing you the error message on Discover. To update Flatpaks, I would recommend using Zypper because you can just combine it with the distribution upgrade, Zypper. To do that, you need to open a command line interface and type in sudo flatpak update. So here I'm just showing you how to combine it with the earlier commands that I shared with you. So it would be cleaning the repo, refreshing the repo, and then doing the distribution upgrade. Like the Zypper command for Flatpak update as well, you need to type in yes to proceed. It would again run these commands sequentially. So it would first update Flatpak and then proceed with the distribution upgrade. Now moving on to AppImages. This is another package which bundles all the dependencies within a single executable file. The only issue with this is it is quite complicated to manage how to launch it and so on. So for that, there is an application called Gear Lever, which we can install and easily manage the installation, the uninstallation, as well as the updates. AppImages like Flatpak is flavor agnostic and can be installed on any Linux flavor. Follow the earlier steps to open Myrlyn, search for Gear Lever and install it. In this example, I'll show you how to install VS Codium, which is an IDE. It's a metricless version of VS Code offered by Microsoft. So to download the package, you can go to the GitHub page, then go to the releases page, scroll until you find the AppImage section and download that file. I cannot emphasize this enough. Please verify the downloads before installing it. So here we will be looking for the SHA-256 checksum. For that, you'll have to scroll down to the assets section and then click on show all assets. Scroll down further until you find the AppImage file. As you can see over there, all the checksums are listed. All you have to do is click on the button to copy it to the clipboard. Open a command line interface, type in SHA-256 sum. In console, you can just hit tab for it to autocomplete any command. Next, you'll have to put the file path. The tilde sign or the squiggly line that you see there basically denotes the home folder. So with a forward slash, we will separate each folder name. So here the file is located in the downloads folder. Once you put the full file name and hit enter, it will give you the SHA-256 checksum from the downloaded file. Now we will have to compare it with what we copied in the clipboard. For that, I use LibreOffice Calc and use a simple formula of equal to exact A1 and A2, which is basically the checksums from the clipboard and the checksum from the command line interface and see if they both tally to true. Next, we'll use gear lever to install the application. So open the application launcher. In the utilities section, you will find gear lever. Open the app. Before we do anything, we'll set up some initial preferences. Just make sure that the app image default folder is the AppImages folder in the home directory. You can enable the check updates on startup and so on, and leave the rest of the settings as is. Now to install the file, you need to click on Open, navigate to the download folder where the AppImage file is, select it, click Open, wait for it to load. Now you can launch the application, but our intent is to move it to the app menu so that it creates a launcher file. So go ahead and click it, and then you will notice in the app launcher, the application now has an entry there for us to launch. One of the good things about AppImages is apps like Signal Messenger and Tuta Mail, they update from within the app. So you do not need a separate package manager to update it. However, in this particular case, especially for app images that come from, in this example, GitHub, you can use gear lever to enable auto updates. In the application page, you have an update management section where it says source. In this example, since it's GitHub, we'll select GitHub. You'll have to update the username and repo. So just copy the VS Codium portion of it. You do not have to copy the full link. And then you need to update the file name. That you can copy it from console. So now we're going to modify the file name. If you use the file name as is, it'll keep checking for that specific version and it will not update. We need to update the file name with a wildcard so that gear lever will search GitHub for the application with name starting with VS Codium hyphen followed by some text which would happen to be the version number and ending with the x86-64 architecture which we require and with the file type as AppImage. If you want, you can allow pre-releases. I usually don't, but if you want, you can toggle it on or off as required. Once you're done, click Save, and then you can go ahead and launch the application for the first time. To uninstall the application, all you have to do is click on the application. You will see remove there, click it. You'll be prompted again. Once you're sure, you can go ahead and remove it. Or else, you can just simply delete the app image from the AppImages folder in your home directory. It's as simple as that. One final thing I wanted to cover is the firmware update. This is different from the distribution upgrade and so on. Here basically it updates the UEFI database. This is a pretty simple operation where in console you type in fwupdmgr, which is firmware update manager, space update, hit enter. If there are any updates, go ahead and accept it for it to install. These updates are infrequent, so you can check these updates every 3 months or so. Once you update it, please make sure to restart the system. That brings us to the end of the three-part playlist where we covered the installation of openSUSE Tumbleweed, post-installation steps, and now how to install applications. In the next video, I'll be covering why I choose Linux as a long time back, why Tumbleweed in specific, and why I choose the KDE desktop environment as a primary desktop environment. If you found value in this video or my voice just put you to sleep, share this video with fellow insomniacs or people who are planning to switch to Tumbleweed or plan on moving from Windows over to Linux. If you'd like to help build this channel, head over to my Patreon page and subscribe. For all subscribers, I offer a cherry tree notebook with detailed steps of the tutorials I've covered and some additional commands that I generally use in Tumbleweed.